Hello and welcome to January 15th. It is Tuesday. We know what that means. It's also News Day. Today we are determining the central theme or central idea of a text. Maybe there's one or of two or more central ideas. And we're going to analyze their development over the course of that text, including how they interact and build on one another. Um, We've got the scale, which hasn't changed since last week. A form means that you can identify the central ideas in the text, the evidence that the author uses to prove his or her point, and how the ideas build on one another. A three means that you can identify the central ideas and the evidence that the author uses to prove his or her point. A two means that you can identify the central ideas of the text. So this means that you're probably not, I'm not seeing that you are identifying the correct evidence. You might be able to say, well, this is what the point of the article is, but I need you to be able to look and identify the evidence in the text to help me prove that. Identifying that evidence tells me that you're really grasping the main idea. And a one means that you were unsure of where to start, and or that you can't find the central idea. Which is okay. I mean, it's something that at least it's something we can build off of. To receive one full unit for today's lesson, you must highlight, or you can underline if you don't have a highlighter, the main idea. You should put a circle around the evidence that the author uses to support his or her point, and you should box any other central ideas in the text. So what I'm saying is there might be two. We will be working again with these four skills. The first is to identify the topic. Remember that the topic is not the main idea. The topic of the story gives us an idea, and we can start to predict what the main idea might be, but the topic is different from the main idea. We want to be able to summarize in about 10 to 12 words what the story is about. We want to be able to identify the first sentence and the last sentence of the article. If you can do that, you probably will have a pretty good grasp of what the article is about, because generally authors will identify it right in the beginning and restate it at the end, including some of their evidences and why they feel strongly about that topic in the first place. And finally, we want to look for some repeated ideas. There usually, if you can see that an idea has been repeated throughout, it's going to lead you to the central idea. Today's article comes from the money section. It was written on the 9th, and the title is, "With Slump in iPhone Sales, Are We Post-Peak Smartphone?" Now, good readers will be able to take a title and sort of have a guess about what the article is going to be about. They'll be able to predict a little bit. One of the things that I know about iPhone sales is that the iPhone X or the iPhone 10 or however they're phrasing it is about $1,000. I would suggest that maybe that's why iPhone sales are down. It's an expensive thing, and you have to prioritize your money in such a way that is of importance to you. And if that's of importance to you, that's great. But it probably means that you're sacrificing somewhere else. And so if I feel that if iPhone sales were more affordable, sales might go up. Or if their phones were more affordable, sorry, that their sales might go up. We'll see what the article has to say. So it says, behind Apple's disconcerting news of weak iPhone sales lies a more sobering truth. The tech industry has hit peak smartphone, a tipping point when everyone who can afford one already owns one, and no breakthroughs are compelling them to upgrade as frequently as they once did. Some manufacturers have boosted prices to keep up profit, but Apple's shortfalls highlights the limits of that strategy. The company said demand for iPhones is waning, and revenue for the last quarter of 2018 will fall well below projections, a decrease traced mainly to China. So if we pause here and look back at the first paragraph, we see what is an interesting point. They're calling it peak smartphone, which is a tipping point when everyone who can afford one already owns one. And here's the key, I think, so far, that no breakthroughs are compelling them to upgrade as frequently as they once did. This means that the battery is essentially the same. It might be improving a little bit, but we're not going to go drop our phones and spend a ton more money just to get a little bit longer battery life. The camera's good on most of these phones. That would be one of the things that isn't a breakthrough. at least one that's not compelling enough to upgrade. These phones aren't doing things markedly different than the one before it. You know, the X versus the 8 versus the 7. It might be improving a little, but they're not doing anything so great that it's prompting people to want to buy them. On to the third paragraph here. Apple's shares dropped 10% Thursday, January 3rd. On the news, its worst loss since 2013. The company shed $74.6 billion in market value amid a broader sell-off among technology companies, which suffered their worst loss in 7 years. Apple's news is a wake-up call for the industry, said analyst Dan Ives of research firm Wedbush Securities. And it's not just Apple. Demand has been lackluster across the board, Ives said. Samsung, long the leading seller of smartphones, has been hit even harder as its phone shipments dropped 8% during the 12 months ending in September. Quote unquote, the smartphone industry is going through significant headwinds, Ives said. Smartphone makers used to be like teenagers, and the industry was on fire. Now it feels like they're more like senior citizens in terms of maturity. Tech innovations in phones grew in leaps and bounds earlier in the 2010s, with dramatic improvements in screen size, screen resolution, battery life, cameras, and processor speed every year. But the industry is a victim of its own success. Innovation began to slow down around 2014 once Apple boosted the screen size with the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus models. While phones kept improving, new features tended to be incremental, such as the new flash technique to already excellent phone cameras. It's the stuff consumers won't typically notice, or want to shell out for. Quote unquote, since the iPhone 6, you've seen it has been tough to innovate to continue to raise the bar, I've said. Apple customers now upgrade every 33 months on average, longer than the 24 or 25 months 3 years ago, he said. Apple's diminished growth projections, fueled by plummeting sales in China, have reinforced fears that the world's second largest economy is losing steam. Its $1,000 iPhone is a tough sell to Chinese consumers unnerved by an economic slump and the trade war with the US. They also have a slew of cheaper smartphones from homegrown competitors, such as, and then those are the couple companies there that they can choose from as well that aren't Samsung or Apple. So the competition's higher, and we know that when you have competition that's higher, that tends to drive the prices down because there's more to compete with. There's more companies to compete with, and these companies want your business. Continuing on here. The fact that even Apple's iPhone juggernaut is cements a larger trend for all major smartphone makers. After a steady rise for a decade, worldwide smartphone shipments fell 3% to 1.42 billion in 2018. The first annual drop according to the International Data Corporation, which tracks such movements. The IDC, International Data Corporation, estimates that shipments will rebound 3% in 2019 to 1.46 billion, but that still falls short of the levels in 2017. It doesn't help that the top phones come with 4-digit price tags, $1,100 for the iPhone XS Max and $1,000 for Samsung's Galaxy Note 9. The top-end Max model sells for $1,450 in the US. They're quote-unquote, they're getting more and more expensive while offering fewer and fewer new innovative features that I'll actually use, says Zachary Pardis, a tech-savvy 31-year-old in Fairfield, Connecticut. I'll upgrade when the battery stops working. When I'm forced to buy a new phone, I'll buy a new phone. Vivian Yang, a manager at a Beijing technology company, also balked at the price. Nobody needs such a phone, she said. IDC analyst Ramon Lamas said that the cycle might bottom out and start growing again in 2021 or 2022 when people's current phones starts reaching the end of their useful life. Quote unquote, people will still replace their phones. It's going to happen eventually, he said. But there's no silver bullet that will spur growth to levels seen in the past when the industry was less mature. Foldable smartphones with screens that unfold like a wallet to increase display size are one thing that could spur excitement, but they're expensive and not due out until at least the end of the year. Another thing that might spur growth is 5G, the next generation that telecom companies are currently in the process of building, expected to be faster and more reliable than the current 4G network. The first 5G compatible phones are due out this year. Quote unquote, there's more pressure on 5G as the next wave smartphone, since sales are so lackluster, said Ives. There will be a battle royale for 5G phones. But 5G will take years for broad nationwide deployment, so the new 5G smartphones coming out this year are not likely to make much of a splash immediately either. Analysts say smartphone makers need to push into undersaturated areas like Africa and elsewhere and sell more services like cloud storage, streaming music, and phone software. But the glory days of untrammeled growth appear to be over. It's going to be a slow slog, Lamas said. By no means is this the end of the smartphone market, but this is an indication that the smartphone market can be a victim of its own success. So I think with this article, you'll be able to summarize the story. Sorry, we'll start with at the top. Identify the topic, summarize the story, and identify the first and last sentences. But I think what's going to be key here and what's really going to make the main idea clear is the repeated ideas that show up throughout the article. The ideas that smartphone sales are going down because people don't want to buy new phones. Nothing is changing enough for people to want to buy new phones with each new model. There was a consumer testimonial that said, I'm just going to buy a new phone when my phone dies. I don't need to upgrade. The iPhone 6 and the iPhone 6 Plus changed the game a lot when they came out in terms of in terms of screen size. But the 7, the 8, and the X just didn't change enough to make that person or many others want to move. They also talked about the price, and they also kind of talked about what it might take to spur improvement, is what they called it, and the few things that they think 2019 might bring as far as spurring improvement. Smartphones aren't going anywhere. If you recall, there was a quote in the article, and I will go back and see if I can find it here. This is the article, or the quote that I was considering. People will still replace their phones. It's going to happen eventually. Ramon Lamas figures that in 2021 or 2022, when our phones, like let's say you just got a new phone, when that phone is no longer useful, the battery or some hardware issues on the inside fall apart, people are still going to buy phones. Phones will still be the sort of hot technology, but just nothing's changing enough for people to want to buy them. So as you consider the things that came up here, what do you think the main idea of the text is? When you look at the different things that you filled out on this document, which I'll hand out to you as a hard copy, what do you think the main idea, the central idea of the article is, based on what we've talked about and what you've written down? Once you've done that, you have the vocab as well, and then you are done with your unit for the day.